There are people who become famous, and then there are people who become inevitable. People whose talent is so enormous, whose will is so unbreakable that the world has no choice but to stop and pay attention. Beyoncé Giselle Knowles-Carter is one of those people. She is, by almost any measure, the greatest entertainer alive today. 35 Grammy Awards, the most any artist has ever won in the history of the Recording Academy. 8 studio albums, all 8 debuted at #1. A Renaissance World Tour that grossed nearly $600 million. A Cowboy Carter Tour that made $400 million more. And in December 2025, Forbes confirmed what her fans had always believed. Beyoncé became a billionaire, the 5th musician in history to ever reach that milestone. But none of that happened by accident. Behind the crowns, the sold-out stadiums, and the perfectly choreographed performances, there is a story that most people have never heard in full. A story of a little girl in Houston who lost on national television, a family that sacrificed everything, a music industry that tried to control her, a marriage that cracked under the weight of secrets, and a woman who took every single one of those broken pieces and built something extraordinary. This is the full story of Beyoncé from the beginning. Chapter 1. Early Life in Houston, Texas, 1981 to 1990. On September 4th, 1981, in Houston, Texas, a baby girl was born to Matthew and Tina Knowles. They named her Beyoncé Giselle, Beyoncé after her mother's maiden name, Beyonce, a tribute to her Creole heritage. Tina's family was of French, African, and Native American descent, Louisiana Creoles who had carried their culture across generations. Matthew was a black man from Alabama who had built himself up through sheer determination, eventually landing a high-paying job as a medical equipment salesman for Xerox. The Knowles family was comfortable, not rich, but stable. They lived in a modest home in a working-class neighborhood in Houston, and Beyoncé grew up alongside her younger sister Solange and her best friend Kelly Rowland, who eventually moved in with the Knowles family after her own difficult home situation. From the very beginning, Beyoncé was different. By the time she was 7 years old, she was already a soloist in her church choir. Her voice, even then, made people stop talking. Her dance teacher noticed something special too, something beyond raw talent, a presence, a magnetism, a girl who the moment she stepped onto any stage made every single eye in the room find her. She began competing in local singing and dancing competitions, and she won, over 30 of them before the age of 10. Her mother Tina would later say that Beyoncé was almost painfully shy in everyday life, quiet, bookish, not the type to speak up in a crowd. But the moment music played, something changed. The shyness disappeared. Something else, something ancient and enormous, took over. Beyoncé herself once said, "My mother loved me unconditionally, so I felt safe enough to dream. My father stressed discipline and was tough with me. He pushed me to be a leader and an independent thinker." That combination, unconditional love and iron discipline, would define everything that came next. Chapter 2. Girls' Time, The Dream Begins, 1990 to 1996. In 1990, something important happened in Houston, Texas. 9-year-old Beyoncé auditioned for a local girls group. At that audition, she met a girl named Latavia Roberson. The two became fast friends, and together, with Kelly Rowland and a sister, they began to form what would eventually become one of the most successful girls groups in music history. The group went through several names: Girls' Time, Something Fresh, Cliché, The Dolls, and finally, Destiny. Their big break, or what they thought would be their big break, came in 1992. A West Coast music producer named Arnie Frazier heard about the group and flew to Houston specifically to meet them. He was captivated, but mostly by one girl, Beyoncé. He thought she had personality and ability beyond her years. Frasier's plan was bold: put the group on Star Search, the biggest talent competition show on national television. If they won, a record deal was almost guaranteed. The girls were 11 years old. They rehearsed relentlessly. They performed in Tina's hair salon, headliners, testing routines for customers who would give honest feedback. Matthew ran what he called boot camp sessions, rigorous training in vocals and choreography every single summer. These children weren't just having fun, they were preparing for a career. Then came the Star Search performance. The girls took the stage in front of millions of American viewers. They were good, they were talented, they were polished in a way that seemed impossible for their age. And they lost. The judges gave the win to another group. The girls were devastated. Beyoncé later reflected that the loss was partly about song choice. They had been rapping instead of showcasing her voice. But in that moment, standing under those lights, hearing the audience react to another group's victory, it felt like the dream was over. It wasn't. It was only just beginning. That loss did something unexpected. It lit a fire in Matthew Knowles that would change his entire life and his family's. Matthew quit his job. His well-paid, stable corporate career at Xerox, gone. He walked away from it to become a full-time manager of a group of girls, including his own daughter. The family's income was cut in half. They had to split up and move into 2 separate apartments to save money. Tina kept working, Matthew kept pushing, and the girls, Beyoncé, Kelly, Latavia, and a new member, LaToya Luckett, kept rehearsing, performing, and dreaming. In 1995, they got their first shot at a record deal with Elektra Records. The label signed them, changed their name to Destiny's Child, and then, before a single song was ever released, dropped them. For another family, that might have been the end. For the Knowles family, it was just another obstacle. In 1996, Destiny's Child was signed to Columbia Records, and this time, the world was ready for them. Chapter 3, Destiny's Child, Rise, Drama, and Betrayal, 1997 to 2002. Destiny's Child releases their first major single, No 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 Part 2. It reaches the top 10 on the Billboard charts. It was the beginning. Then came 1999 and the album that changed everything. The Writings on the Wall dropped in 1999. It was sharp, confident, and perfectly timed for the late 90s R&B moment. The album contained 2 #1 singles, Bills, Bills, Bills and Say My Name. Both were female empowerment anthems in an era when women were looking for exactly that kind of voice. Destiny's Child sold millions of records worldwide. They became one of the best-selling female groups in music history. But by 2001, it was clear Beyoncé was about to outgrow the group. Chapter 4, Going Solo, Dangerously in Love, 2003 to 2006. In 2003, Beyoncé stepped out from behind the group name and into the spotlight alone. Her debut solo album, Dangerously in Love, was everything: confident, vulnerable, ambitious. The lead single, Crazy in Love, featuring a rapper named Jay-Z, a man who would become central to her life, was a cultural earthquake. The horn sample, the call and response, the way Beyoncé moved in the movie video, it was a new era for R&B. The album sold 317,000 copies in its first week alone. It earned her 5 Grammy Awards at the 2004 Grammy ceremony, making her the most awarded woman in a single night at that point in Grammy history. The industry could no longer treat her as just a member of a group. She was a solo superstar. She followed up with B-Day in 2006, recorded just in 30 days, a creative sprint that shocked the industry. Hit after hit, Irreplaceable, Ring the Alarm, Deja Vu, each song a different color of the same brilliant artist. And in 2006, Destiny's Child officially disbanded. It was the end of one chapter, but by then, Beyoncé was already deep into the next one. Chapter 5, Jay-Z, Marriage, and the Power Couple Era, 2007 to 2013.
Let's talk about Jay-Z. Their relationship had been building for years, a slow, carefully guarded thing between two of the most private people in the music industry. They had collaborated on music, they had been seen together, but they never confirmed anything publicly. Then, on April 4th, 2008, in a small private ceremony in New York City, Beyoncé Knowles and Sean Corey Carter, Jay-Z, got married. The guest list was tiny, just close family and friends, no press, no fanfare. In an industry where every moment is performed for an audience, it was one of the most genuinely intimate acts of their public lives. Together, they became the most powerful couple in the history of popular music. Combined, their net worth was almost incomprehensible. Their cultural influence was even larger. In 2008, Beyoncé released I Am Sasha Fierce, a double album that introduced the world.
Chapter 7. Lemonade, Turning Heartbreak into Art, 2016. On April 23, 2016, Beyoncé did something that no artist of her magnitude had ever done before. With virtually no advance warning, no press release, no lead single, no promo campaign, she released a 65-minute film on HBO, and then, immediately afterward, she dropped the album that accompanied it. It was called Lemonade. It began with a poem. The past and the future merge to meet us here. What luck, what a fucking curse. And from that opening, Beyoncé did something extraordinary. She opened every door she had spent years keeping closed. She talked about infidelity, about rage, about grief, about the terrifying experience of loving someone who has hurt you and choosing, against every instinct, to stay. She was raw in a way that superstars almost never allow themselves to be. She wore yellow. She smashed car windows with a baseball bat. She waded through floodwaters in New Orleans. She spoke in poetry. She sang with a fury and a tenderness that left people genuinely speechless. "Are you cheating on me?" she asked on one track, and on another, the devastating Sorry, she sang about a woman, Becky with the good hair. The press went wild. Rachel Roy again. The theories, the dissections, the articles and counter-articles and think pieces. But Beyoncé never named anyone. She didn't need to. What she gave the world instead was something more important than gossip. She gave millions of women a language for what they had felt but couldn't express. The feeling of loving someone who has broken your trust. The impossible choice between walking away and staying to fight. Lemonade was not just an album, it was a confession, a masterpiece, a cultural document. It sold millions of copies, it swept the Grammy nominations, and in one of the most controversial moments in Grammy history, it lost Album of the Year to Adele's 25. Adele herself, upon accepting the award, looked at Beyoncé in the audience and said, "I can't possibly accept this award. The Lemonade album was so monumental, it was so brilliant. You are our light." The Grammy loss hit hard. Not just Beyoncé, her fans, the Beehive, were furious. Critics pointed to a pattern. Despite being the most dominant artist of her generation, the Recording Academy kept passing her over, year after year, album after album. But Beyoncé, in public, said nothing. She just kept working. Chapter 8. Coachella, Black is King, and Renaissance, 2018 to 2022. April 2018, Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival, Indio, California. Beyoncé became the first black woman and the first woman of color ever to headline Coachella. What she delivered that night was not a concert, it was a statement, a full orchestral performance rooted in the tradition of historically black colleges and universities, a marching band, a step team, a choir, cultural references stretching across decades of Black American artistic history, and then Destiny's Child reunited on stage for the first time in years.
The internet called it Betrayal. It instantly became one of the most discussed live music performances in history. Netflix filmed a documentary, Homecoming, that gave viewers a behind-the-scenes look at the 18 months of preparation, the rigorous rehearsals, the emotional weight Beyoncé had been carrying through 2 pregnancies, through personal loss, through the simple, impossible task of being that good all the time. In 2019, Beyoncé released The Lion King: The Gift, a companion album to the live-action Lion King in which she voiced Nala, a deeply African-rooted project that mixed Afrobeats, hip-hop, and R&B in a way that felt both new and ancient. Then came 2020 and the pandemic. The world went quiet. In 2020, Beyoncé released Black is King, a visual album on Disney Plus that was a year in the making. Stunning, cinematic, a meditation on Black identity, diaspora, heritage, and pride. It won the Grammy for Best Music Video. In 2022, she dropped Renaissance, a love letter to Black LGBTQ+ club culture, to dance music, to the underground pioneers who had never received their credit. It was joyful in a way that Lemonade had not been. It was free, and it was groundbreaking, the first in what she announced would be a trilogy of albums. The Renaissance World Tour in 2023 became the highest-grossing tour by a Black artist in history, earning nearly $600 million in ticket sales alone, 2.7 million tickets sold, 56 nights of pure spectacle. And still, the Album of the Year Grammy continued to elude her, despite 5 nominations over her career, despite being universally acknowledged as the most important artist of her era. Jay-Z, accepting an award at the 2024 Grammy ceremony, said it directly. "I don't want to embarrass this young lady, but she has more Grammys than everyone and never won Album of the Year." The room fell silent. But change was coming. Chapter 9. Carter and the greatest comeback in music in history, 2024 to 2025. Nobody saw it coming. In 2024, Beyoncé, the queen of R&B and pop, the woman who redefined what a visual album could be, the artist who had won every award except the one she deserved most, made a country album. Carter arrived on March 29, 2024. It was an act of pure audacity. Country music, a genre with deep, complicated ties to race and exclusion in America, had never been claimed this way by a Black woman at this level of fame. There were gatekeepers who questioned it, radio stations who hesitated. Beyoncé made them irrelevant. The album was brilliant, rooted in the actual history of Black contributions to country, blues, and Americana, tracing a lineage that the mainstream had long ignored. It generated 1.2 billion streams on Spotify, 400,000 album equivalent sales in 2024, the most of any album that year. And then, in February 2025, at the 67th Annual Grammy Awards, with the room holding its collective breath, Beyoncé won Album of the Year. For the first time, after 6 nominations, after decades of being passed over, after an entire career of being the standard against which everyone else was measured. She also won Best Country Album, making her the first Black woman in history to do so. When she walked to that stage and accepted that Grammy, she became the most awarded artist in the history of the Recording Academy. 35 Grammys, more than anyone, ever. Following the Grammys, she launched the Carter and the Rodeo Chitlin Circuit Tour, 32 shows that grossed over $400 million in ticket sales alone, an additional $50 million in merchandise, the highest-grossing concert tour of 2025, the fastest tour in history to reach $400 million. The Destiny's Child reunion happened again, Kelly Rowland and Michelle Williams joining Beyoncé on stage in Las Vegas, the three of them together under the lights one more time, in front of a crowd that knew all the words to every song. And in December 2025, Forbes announced it officially. Beyoncé was a billionaire, the fifth musician in history to reach that milestone, joining Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Bruce Springsteen, and her husband, Jay-Z. The little girl who lost on Star Search in 1992 had become the most awarded musician in the history of the world. She is not finished. Whatever comes next, and there will be a next, will be on her terms, at her pace, in her time. Because that is who Beyoncé Carter Knowles has always been. The girl from Houston, the one who showed up, the one who stayed, and the one who, in the end, won everything. Thank you for watching Hollywood Now TV. If you loved this story, subscribe and hit the bell. We post full celebrity documentaries every week. Comment below, what was the moment in Beyoncé's life that surprised you most?